He said it live, with the kind of grin that makes cameras lean closer. Chuck Norris is nothing but a broken cowboy from the past. The words cut through the stadium louder than the speakers, louder than the music that had been pumping seconds earlier. For a breath, the crowd didn't know how to respond. The silence that followed weighed more than any punch ever could. The arena lights were merciless, white beams sweeping across 20,000 faces, bouncing off chrome railings, hitting the sweat on foreheads. The smell was a mix of popcorn, beer, and the faint metallic tang of blood from some undercard fight that had ended badly. Televisions across the country were broadcasting the moment live. People in bars from Dallas to Detroit stopped mid-sentence. People in living rooms leaned forward, holding their drinks too tight. And at the center of it all stood The Rock. He was on top of the world. Muscles slick, smile wide, the confidence of a man who knew the crowd loved him even when he spat on someone else's legacy. He worked the stage like it was his personal playground, pacing with the microphone in hand, stopping just long enough for the camera to drink in the outline of his shoulders. His voice had the rhythm of a preacher and the edge of a bully. He didn't just say it once, he repeated it, savoring each word, letting the insult linger like a taunt meant to outlast the echo. His fans, most of them younger, louder, their faces painted with slogans, exploded into cheers. They wanted a spectacle. They wanted to watch him crush an old hero. Then the camera cut to Chuck. He was seated at the press table, not moving, the same measured expression he'd worn since the event began. His jaw was still, his hands folded loosely in front of him, the lines of his face carved by years more than makeup. He didn't blink at the words. He didn't lean toward the mic to answer. He sat in a silence that stretched into discomfort, into anger, into fascination. The crowd divided instantly. Half booed, half cheered, the noise layering into a single roar that couldn't decide what it meant. "Rocky! Rocky!" rose from one side, a chant stomping on the floor. The other side answered with "Chuck! Chuck!" Slower, heavier, the chant of people who remembered a different kind of toughness. The Rock grinned wider. He loved the division. It was fuel. He raised his arms, beckoning the crowd louder, feeding the fire until the arena was a storm of split loyalties. Then, with calculated cruelty, he walked over to Chuck's end of the table. Cameras followed every step. He leaned down, face inches from Chuck's, eyes bright with provocation. "Say something, old man," he sneered, his mic catching every syllable. "Tell them you're still dangerous? Tell them you've still got teeth." Chuck turned his head slowly, his eyes locking on the rocks. He still didn't touch the microphone. His lips didn't move. Only his gaze did the talking. Steady, unblinking, not angry, but impossibly calm. The effect was instant. The crowd, hungry for more insults, fell into a ripple of silence. It was as if the calm itself reached out and touched them. Some leaned forward, waiting for an explosion that didn't come. Others grew uneasy at how a man could hold so much ground without a single word. The Rock's smile faltered for the first time. Only slightly, but the cameras caught it, and the pause spread through the arena like a rumor. The energy shifted. On the big screen above the ring, the split image lingered. The Rock, loud and burning with charisma, beside Chuck, quiet as stone, his stillness louder than any insult. It was a contrast that told the truth better than commentary could. One man lived off spectacle. The other carried a weight that didn't need proving. The boos returned, mixed with cheers, confused, restless. The Rock stepped back, throwing his arms wide, trying to cover the moment with bravado. "See?" he shouted. "Nothing left." Empty. But the silence Chuck left behind felt heavier than the taunt. The audience wasn't sure anymore if they were watching humiliation or the first crack in a man who thought he couldn't be touched. And somewhere in that confusion, a new question formed in the air, thick enough to taste. If Chuck Norris was truly finished, why did The Rock look just a little less certain than before? Just wondering. Where are you watching from? Write it down, Bellow. The insult didn't stay in the arena. It spread like a crack across glass. By midnight, the clip was everywhere. Slowed down, replayed, captioned with smirks. Morning anchors joked about it over coffee, while talk radio callers argued like it was a presidential debate. Rock buried him. Chuck's finished? No, he's just waiting. Everyone had a side. Promoters barely needed to push. Billboards went up overnight. The Rock's grin in the foreground, Chuck's weathered profile in the shadows. In gyms, young men copied The Rock's swagger between sets, while older guys shook their heads and muttered about timing, about patience. At lunch counters and barber shops, the argument circled the same. Is silence weakness, or is it a weapon? The presser 2 days later was louder than a fight night. The arena smelled of buttered pretzels and cheap beer. Cords snaked under folding chairs, and reporters fought for sightlines. Fans had already split the place in half. Chants of "Rocky" ricocheted against "Chuck, Chuck." The noise didn't blend. It collided, creating a rhythm that shook the rafters. The Rock came in first, handlers trailing, sunglasses indoors. He played to the crowd, hitting his marks like a showman who knew the lens was his. "History's great," he told the cameras, "but tonight we prove its history." Cheers rattled the floor. Chuck arrived without announcement, jacket plain, eyes steady. He sat, folded his hands, and when asked for comment, shook his head. "Not yet?" 2 words, nothing more. Some laughed, others leaned forward. To some it looked like a flat tire. To others, it looked like pacing, conserving air for when it mattered. The Rock couldn't leave it there. He rose, circled the table, his mic live. Each step boomed through the PA. He leaned in close, so close the crowd held its breath. "Say something," he taunted. "Just nod when you're ready to admit it." He laid a heavy hand on Chuck's shoulder. The younger crowd laughed and cheered. Phones lit the moment from every angle. But Chuck didn't move. He simply looked up, eyes finding the rocks, unblinking. The shift was immediate. The chants stuttered and fell. Even those cheering grew quiet, as if caught in a moment they didn't understand. For the first time all week, the Rock's smile faltered, only for a second. But it was enough. Cameras caught it, and the silence spread like a ripple. The moderator cleared his throat, tried to move things along, but no one listened. The audience had become its own character now, surging with split loyalty. Younger voices jeered. Older ones held the hush like a candle. Reporters shouted over each other, begging for words that wouldn't come. Finally, the Rock backed off, thumping the table to reclaim bravado. "Tomorrow," he boomed, "we make it official." Half the crowd roared approval. The other half sat with the weight of Chuck's quiet, wondering why a man so certain had felt the need to push so hard. On the way out, Chuck finally gave them a line. "See you at the bell." It wasn't clever. It sounded like a man checking his watch before walking into rain. By dawn, that clip was dissected everywhere. Analysts slowed down the stare. Body language experts debated the hand on the shoulder. Social feeds split into 2 worlds, one calling The Rock the future, the other asking why he'd needed to test the past at all. When fans filed into the arena the next night, the chants started before the lights dimmed. "Rocky" clashed with "Chuck" in waves. The air smelled of sweat, metal railings, fried food. People weren't just waiting for a fight, they were waiting to see whose truth would hold when the bell rang. The lights cut without warning, and 20,000 people gasped as one. Darkness swallowed the arena for half a heartbeat, then split open with a boom of bass and a wash of red light. Screens flared alive, pumping slow-motion clips of knockouts, headlines, faces. The sound system pounded until ribs vibrated. The night had become theater. The Rock's entrance hit like a storm surge. His theme crashed through the speakers. Lights swept in sync with his stride, and the crowd surged with him. Hands raised, chants shaking the rafters. He slapped the outstretched palms on the way down the ramp, flexed for cameras, pointed to his chest. Every step was a reminder. This was his house, his show, his moment. He smiled with the confidence of a man who believed his own myth. Then the music shifted. Lower, slower. A single spotlight snapped to the tunnel. Chuck walked out without fireworks, without entourage. No wave, no pandering to the crowd. Just steady footsteps, his eyes fixed on the squared canvas ahead. His silence worked like gravity. The noise around him didn't stop, but it bent. People who had been shouting leaned back, uncertain why their throats tightened. On the screen above, his face was calm, jawline carved by years, gaze unreadable. They entered the ring in sequence. The ropes shook under the Rock's weight as he bounded in, playing to the camera on every side, hands raised high. He was carved muscle and sweat, gleaming under the lights. Chuck stepped through the ropes like a man entering a room, not a stage. He didn't raise his fists, didn't glance at the crowd. He rolled his shoulders once, checked his stance, and looked only at the opponent across from him. The referee brought them center. Instructions blurred under the roar of the audience. "Rocky!" chants hit like thunder from one side. "Chuck!" answered from the other, slower but no less certain. The air tasted of electricity and iron, the sharp tang of adrenaline spilling off the fighters and into the stands. The bell snapped. The Rock lunged first, explosive, violent, wide steps chewing canvas. He wanted dominance before the old man could breathe. He threw his weight behind a swinging right, then another, crowd roaring with each heavy arc. He smiled mid-flurry, already tasting the finish. Chuck didn't panic. He tilted just enough, slipped outside the line, let the punches cut air. No wasted movement. His feet whispered against the canvas, shoulders relaxed. He didn't throw back at once. He watched. Every strike was a sentence, and he was reading them, patient, waiting for the page to turn. The Rock pressed harder, driving him into the ropes, slamming a shoulder, hooking with his left. The crowd rose, scent of beer and sweat spilling into the aisles, convinced the avalanche would bury him. Chuck dipped, slid out sideways, and the audience gasped as the man who was supposed to crumble stood untouched in open space. Then came the moment. The Rock launched again, coiled for power, his right arm swinging like a hammer. Chuck shifted his weight, stepped inside the arc, and with a motion so small it seemed invisible, redirected it. A palm at the wrist, a twist, and suddenly the Rock's own force spun him half off balance. Before the crowd processed it, Chuck's hand brushed his chest, a push no harder than shutting a door. But it was perfectly timed. The younger man stumbled back, his boots squealing against canvas. The arena detonated. Shouts crashed into each other, disbelief loudest of all. Phones caught the instant from 100 angles. The Rock's eyes wide, his smile gone, his chest heaving after less than a round. Chuck, by contrast, stood square, breathing slow, as if he had only just begun to warm up. The Rock shook his head, jaw tightening, pacing in a circle to reclaim momentum. He slapped his chest, barked at the crowd, forcing the smile back onto his face. But sweat ran in rivers already, his shoulders rising higher with each breath. He had expected collapse. He had not expected resistance. Chuck didn't move to capitalize. He let the younger man burn, let him waste energy shouting, let him look for a crowd that no longer sounded so certain. Every second that passed, the noise shifted. The chants of Rocky still came, but they cracked, uncertain at the edges. The Chuck chants grew steadier, heavier, a drumbeat too slow to ignore. The Rock came forward again, wild with the need to reset the story. His fists flew, harder, less precise. Chuck stepped back once, twice, then cut an angle and slipped out. He tapped the younger man's ribs with a shot so fast most didn't see it until the Rock winced, hand brushing his side. It wasn't power, it was punctuation, proof that timing eats muscle when patience waits long enough. By the end of the round, the difference was clear. The Rock stood chest heaving, sweat flinging from his arms as he paced. His grin was gone, replaced with clenched teeth and narrowed eyes. He had given the crowd fire and had little left to show for it. Chuck stood calm in his corner, breathing even, his expression unchanged. The bell rang, cutting the noise into fragments. Reporters scribbled. Fans leaned into each other, asking the same question in different words. This wasn't going the way they thought. And The Rock, superstar, showman, king of spectacle, looked, for the first time, like a man who had underestimated the silence staring back at him. The bell bought him 60 seconds, but the camera gave him none. It came in too close, catching the heat on his skin and the staggered rise of his chest. The Rock stared past his cut man, past the towel, into the blinding white of the rigged lights. On the giant screen, his expression looked like control, pulled tight over something unruly. He nodded at advice he didn't hear. Water dribbled down his chin. His mouth found the familiar grin, but it arrived late and left early. Across the ring, Chuck sat like he'd stepped into a quiet room. Elbows on knees, palms open, eyes not on the Rock, not on the crowd, not on the screen. On nothing at all, as if he were resting inside a space only he could find. His corner spoke low. He didn't answer. He breathed. That was all. It made the air around him feel cooler than the rest of the arena. Phones glowed in the stands. Feeds updated in real time. He's back. Old man's timing is poison. Rock underestimated the Cowboy. Commentators reined in their earlier swagger, talking about experience management and energy spend as if they'd been saying it all night. The sound in the building shifted. Rocky still hit like waves, but half the room began answering with Chuck's name, slow and patient, a kind of drumline. You could hear the age cut through the chant, the way people who've seen a thing or two say a name. The Rock stood. His chest broadened. He snarled a sentence at himself. He paced to center with the tight bounce of a man who decided to sprint through a headwind. Chuck rose last, unhurried, and the referee glanced at him the way people glance at a clock they trust. Second bell. The Rock went hard, hotter than before. Hooks thudding into Chuck's guard, shoulders rolling, feet chewing canvas. He threw a right so heavy the air carried it, then a left that would have buckled a lesser man. He wanted noise. He wanted the old soundtrack back. The crowd obliged, at first. Chuck's answers were tiny. A drop of a shoulder, 3 inches of head movement, a step that looked like nothing until the glove missed by a nail's width. He didn't counter yet. He let space do the talking, made the ring bigger by refusing to chase. The economy of it read to some like disdain, to others like mastery. The Rock overswung on a hook and spun through a quarter turn, boots squealing. Laughter bubbled, not cruel, but nervous, a sound people make when they recognize momentum slipping. He reset fast, scowled, and charged. Chuck dipped, and the Rock's glove passed so close to his cheek the leather kissed air. For a beat, the arena went soundless, the kind of hush that finds people rather than the other way around. If a glass had dropped then, it would have shattered the whole building. When noise returned, it was different. "Chuck!" came clearer, the consonant catching. On commentary, someone stopped mid-hype and said nothing for a full 2 seconds, a broadcast eternity. The Rock tightened his arc, tried straight shots, tried to erase angles by stepping through them. He clipped Chuck's shoulder and made the crowd flinch on his behalf. He flexed his hands out, shook his head like he could loose the fatigue by posture alone. His breath was loud enough for the first row to hear. Chuck moved easier now, as if the ring had taken a degree of slope in his favor. The old cadence returned. Heel to ball, slide, settle. His eyes didn't leave the rock's sternum, the honest place where rhythm lives. A small twitch showed there, an early tell, expensive in the long run. Chuck banked it without spending. The rock tried to go through the man. He crowded, put forearms on guard, attempted to bully him into a corner. Chuck half-turned, let pressure leak past, and tapped a body shot that was more metronome than damage. The rock's exhale hitched. That was new. Boos arrived from the impatient, the ones who wanted an ending, not a lesson. But the lesson had its own audience now. Older faces leaned forward with a look that wasn't gloating so much as grateful recognition. Younger faces started checking the clock, surprised to find that time had sped up on their guy and slowed down on the other. The Rock found a pocket and ripped a right uppercut, his best of the night. It snapped Chuck's head a fraction and made the camera lunge. Chuck's eyes blinked once in reflex, then returned to neutral like the tide resettling after a boat passes. He didn't answer with heat. He answered by stepping to a place where that punch no longer existed. The absence of panic read as cocky to the hostile seats, and as terrifying to the ones that had been chanting without doubt. Frustration seeped into the Rock's shoulders. His feet began to land heavy, his hips late by a beat. He shouted, words no mic caught, aimed at a man who didn't take orders. Chuck's mouth twitched, not a smile, more like acknowledgement that noise had just confessed something it hadn't meant to. Then came a miss that wasn't supposed to happen. The Rock wound up for a sweeping left to the ribs, and Chuck slid just outside, not even enough to sway his hair. The glove pulled a shadow across where he'd been. Laughter again, louder this time. It wasn't the noise of mockery, it was the crack in a dam. The Rock's eyes widened, the first clean sign of worry, the primitive kind, where the body realizes its map is wrong. He answered by bracing, teeth bared, shoulders high, and came forward in a straight line, a freight decision. Chuck pivoted and let him pass, touched him at the elbow in a way that looked like courtesy and felt like insult. The Rock turned and found nothing. The ring had become a field at night, and Chuck was the fence line you only see when you hit it. Midway through the round, the chants flipped lanes. The Rockies thinned, distant as weather. "Chuck!" gained a bass note, the kind of support that isn't loud so much as sure. On the broadcast, a commentator tried to sell youth and power and ended up admiring footwork on an open mic. The Rock threw wide again, mouth open, breath ragged, and Chuck gave him a single clinical answer. A short, inside check that shaved the edge off the punch and redirected the rest into emptiness. It was small enough to vanish on most screens, not to the man who threw it. His face changed, one heartbeat of naked surprise before the mask returned. Between exchanges, Chuck didn't look at him. He looked past him, as if checking invisible marks on the canvas only he could see. It read as indifference, and indifference is a worse insult than pain. The Rock bit down and came again, but the timing was gone. His fists crowded each other. His feet argued. His lungs sent complaints to the parts of him that make decisions. The bell felt late. The Rock backed up a step and then another, breathing harvests of air. Chuck remained where he was until the referee set a palm between them. He turned away last, not out of showmanship, but because the body moves slower when it's not being chased. As the corners went to work, the cameras hunted for a close-up and found the Rock's face, flushed, eyes bright with a shine that wasn't confidence. He forced a grin, then lost it when his cut man pressed cold steel to his brow. Across the ring, Chuck sat as before, elbows on knees, the noise of the arena moving around him like water around a stone. He didn't look across. He didn't need to. The building understood the new math. What had started as public humiliation now felt like a public dare. One man trying to bend a knight back to his will, the other refusing to help him do it. Twitter scrolled in the aisles, crowd turning. The old man's teaching. Strength isn't loud. Hashtags multiplied. They rose for the next bell with a different appetite. The Rock slapped his chest once, the sound sharp and hollow. He launched as if the round were a wall he could break. Chuck met him with space and time, those patient weapons that don't look like weapons until you're already paying for them. And somewhere inside all that noise, a thin seam opened, the first glimpse of a lesson the younger man hadn't come to learn. The third round opened without ceremony. The Rock came forward again, chest heaving, fists high, trying to rebuild the story the crowd had started to doubt. His shots were broad, heavy, meant to send a message more than land clean. Chuck absorbed them on his guard, stepped aside, and answered only with angles. It wasn't passive, it was restraint sharpened into control. The chants clashed overhead, but the rhythm had shifted. Chuck now had a sturdiness that Rocky lacked. The younger man still had power, but his punches were arriving late, stacked on each other. His aggression was turning into noise. Chuck's stillness was beginning to read as dominance. Then came the whisper. It wasn't for the crowd, wasn't for the cameras, wasn't for anyone but the man throwing fire at him. As the Rock pressed in, shoulders squared, Chuck leaned just close enough and said, calm as a breath, "You're fighting the crowd, not me." The Rock froze half a beat too long. His next shot skidded wide, missing not by inches, but by rhythm. The audience didn't hear the words, but they saw the stumble. They knew something invisible had landed. He tried to recover, doubling up punches, overcommitting. His gloves smacked Chuck's forearms, shoulder, nothing clean. Sweat flew from his hair as he snarled, looking for the old soundtrack, but the noise wasn't coming back. The chants were different now, less about spectacle, more about witness. Chuck stayed patient, turning small circles, reading him. When the Rock lunged again, wild with urgency, Chuck caught his momentum with a pivot, used the man's own forward rush, and with a simple hook of leverage sent him stumbling down onto one knee. The arena detonated, not with mockery, not with pity. Something stranger, louder. Phones shot up, lights glittered, shouts cracked the rafters. For the first time, the Rock had touched canvas in front of all those eyes, and not from power, but from timing. A veteran's trick, done clean, almost gentle. The Rock pushed up fast, jaw clenched, face red with fury. He wanted to turn the slip into nothing, to erase it with speed. But Chuck didn't press, didn't chase. He stepped back, palms open, and made a small gesture. Stand up. The cameras zoomed in on that hand. It wasn't mockery, it wasn't gloating, it looked almost generous. The gesture said, "I'm not here to finish you, I'm here to teach you." The noise changed again. Some booed, wanting blood. Others roared in recognition, feeling the lesson under the fight. On commentary, a voice cracked. "That's not disrespect, that's something else. That's a demonstration." The Rock stood, eyes burning. Pride clashed with confusion, fury with the cold realization that his usual script wasn't working. He wiped sweat with his forearm and circled, every step stiff, every breath loud. His chest rose and fell like bellows. Across from him, Chuck was still, face calm, guard low, waiting. The crowd had stopped laughing. They weren't here for humiliation anymore. They were watching with a different kind of hunger, the kind that comes when you sense something bigger than winning is on the line. The Rock swung again, out of anger more than calculation. Chuck slid aside, let the punch carve air, and placed his hand softly on the Rock's back as he passed, almost guiding him forward like a teacher correcting form. It looked like nothing. It felt like ownership. The bell rang, saving space for the lesson to settle. The Rock stomped to his corner, snatched a water bottle, and spat between gulps. His cut man shouted instructions, but the noise drowned them. Across the ring, Chuck sat on his stool, not winded, not rattled, eyes lowered, conserving the same calm he'd walked in with. On the big screen, the replay looped, the Rock's knee hitting canvas, Chuck's open palm waving him back up. The crowd roared again at the image. Online, hashtag spun out. Lesson in progress. Strength isn't loud. Cowboy's Clinic. The Rock wiped his face with both hands and stared across the ring. The grin was gone now, stripped away. His eyes were raw, furious, but underneath the fury was something heavier. The weight of a man realizing that this wasn't just a fight, it was a mirror. And the crowd, sensing that shift, leaned forward together, waiting to see whether he'd break under the reflection or climb out of it. The fourth bell snapped, and the crowd rose with it. They weren't sitting anymore. The fight had pulled them onto their feet. The Rock leaned heavy against his corner a second too long, then pushed out, jaw tight. The grin was gone. He looked stripped raw, his chest soaked, eyes sharp in a way no camera crew had seen before. Across the ring, Chuck rose without hurry. He brushed chalk dust off his palms as if nothing had touched him. No words, no gesture to the crowd, just a slow lift of his head, eyes on his opponent. The chants had shifted now, not all but enough. Chuck rolled steady, older voices carrying it, while Rocky sounded fractured, nervous. When they met at center, the Rock didn't bounce. He tucked in close, gloves high, punches straight. No more showy arcs, no wasted loops. The commentators picked it up at once. Different man here. He's fighting quiet. The crowd caught the change too. Murmurs rippled through the stands. His shots were tighter now. Jab to the chest, cross to the guard. He touched Chuck twice, clean enough to mark space. Chuck gave nothing back but the faintest nod, acknowledging the adjustment without surrendering control. Seconds drained. The Rock's breath steadied, his eyes locked on Chuck's sternum, not the crowd. Sweat rolled down his temple. He was done playing for cameras. This was private now. Chuck answered with patience, moving like water around a rock. He let the punches slide off his guard, his feet circling with small, exact steps. No rush, no heat, just timing waiting to be spent. Then came a right to the ear, the Rock's best of the round. It thudded, honest, drew a blink. Chuck reset instantly, unbroken. The crowd gasped. Half of them roared for blood. The other half leaned forward in silence, knowing the danger of waking a man who lives on timing. The tension climbed. The clapper hit. 10 seconds. Everyone knew what that meant. Fighters swing for memory at the end of a round. The Rock didn't roar, didn't grandstand. He coiled low, shoulders tight, and threw a half jab, nothing more than a lure. Chuck tilted with it, just enough. Then the hook came. Short, disguised, violent in its simplicity. A shovel strike, angling for ribs and heart. The first punch all night that belonged to no one's highlight reel, only to the truth. The arena froze. People felt it before they saw it. Gasps cracked the silence. Chuck's eyes locked on his, calm but alert. His right hand twitched, parry half-born, feet shifting micro-inches. His chest expanded once, drawing the breath of decision. The Rock's shoulder drove through, committed to consequence, not applause. Around them the crowd was stone still. A woman covered her face. A man whispered, "Please," not knowing which man he meant. The commentators lost words altogether. Sweat hung between them. The glove curved toward its target. Chuck's body began its answer. And in that heartbeat, the smallest room in the world, everything waited. Would the old man's timing close the door? Or had the younger man at last found the one strike that could not be stopped? The bell's shadow fell across the ring. The screen zoomed. The story held there, unfinished, burning, while the whole arena leaned forward into silence.